Live in Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com.
This is Including You, the new series from Lead at Any Level. Including You features stories from chief diversity officers and other executives who are creating inclusive cultures in their organizations. Our goal is to show what's working in companies just like yours, to give you the tools you need to keep pushing for progress in your own workplace. We want to create belonging and opportunity for everyone, including you. And now here's your host, Amy C. Waninger.
Welcome back to Including You. I'm your host, Amy C. Waninger. My guest today is Sacha Thompson. She's the Inclusive Culture Curator and Coach of the Equity Equation. The Equity Equation helps organizations design and curate inclusive environments where all team members and populations feel valued, seen, heard, and connected. Sacha, I am so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so happy to be here. Excited to be here as well, too.
I always like when I know somebody before we talk on the podcast, I always like to explain how we met, because networking is such an important part of what I do. Yes. And what I teach other people to do. So Sacha and I are actually, part of the same mentorship group. And we just spent a weekend together in DC learning all the things.
All the things. And we got to meet each other for the first time in person. And so now we get to do this, which is great. I want to talk to you specifically today about psychological safety, because I know that's an important component of the work that you do for your clients in corporate spaces. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about first, just what is psychological safety? What does that mean? Right. So psychological safety is really being able to speak up, share without fear of retribution, fear of getting pushback, not necessarily pushback, but being punished for speaking up, right? You can speak up and share and challenge the status quo, and that's welcome, right? And so you want to make sure that you're in an environment where there's no fear of being yourself, being unique, that's built in, right? You want to remove those barriers for people.
So it sounds like psychological safety means if we show up in a space where we're psychologically safe, we're not afraid to be excellent. We're not afraid to make mistakes, and we're not afraid to be vulnerable. Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. All of those things are removed. And so what's very interesting about psychological safety is we talk about it as this kind of abstract thing, but it's very measurable. And so what I use, I actually have been part of the Leader Factor program for a while and using their assessments. And so there are 4 stages of psychological safety. So the first stage is inclusion safety. So do I feel included? Am I a part of the team? The second stage is learner safety. Am I able to learn? Not just my job, but about where I am and who's going on and who are the folks you avoid in the hallway kind of thing, like those types of things that are very nuanced to the culture. The third one is contributor safety. Okay, so now that I've learned kind of the environment of where I am, does it feel safe to contribute? Can I share my thoughts and share my ideas and be a part of the conversation? And then the fourth one is challenger safety. Do I feel comfortable and safe to challenge the status quo? If everyone's going right and I think we should go left, do I feel comfortable speaking up and saying that? Or do I see something that could be detrimental to the company? And do I hold on to that because of fear? Or do I speak up because I see the bigger picture? I understand how that could impact not only our employees, but also our customers and clients as well, too. So those are the 4 stages.
So let me ask this, because it sounded like when you said stages that you meant a sequential order, that if I don't feel like I'm included and I don't feel like I can learn, then I don't feel like I can contribute, that those things have to come first. Is that true?
To some degree, yes. But because their teams are dynamic, it's always moving, right? So for example, we've been in this pandemic for a while now. And what I've seen with some of my excuse me, some of my clients has been, they're great at inclusion safety for some people that have been there pre-pandemic. But if you were hired during the pandemic, that inclusion safety is much lower, right? Because yes, they were onboarded, but they are not connected to anyone. They're still at home. They don't know what the company culture is like. And so it can change. So one team could have their scores all over the place because of the dynamics of how people move and how just work happens.
And one more question about this, because I really do want to get into some of the work that you're doing, but I find this topic so fascinating. And it's psychological safety has almost become a buzzword people use without really knowing what it means or where it comes from. People talk about it without really understanding it. So I'm diving in a little deeper because I want to make sure that we really understand what we're talking about. How much of psychological safety is of an individual psychological safety in an environment is a function of the environment versus a function of that person's own confidence and kind of grounding?
It's a combination. And so this is where the beauty of the work that I do comes in, because this is where my coaching hat comes in for managers and for people managers, I should say. So let's say, yes, it's the environment, right? How am I brought in? But if I have some challenges that I'm trying to overcome, imposter syndrome, I hate using that term, that's why I paused a little bit, imposter syndrome, then the manager can actually do his part or her part to help break you out of that. So yes, some of it is internal to ourselves, but as people managers, how can you coach your employees to get out of their own way, right? To help them feel more comfortable in those spaces where they can say, I just don't feel comfortable with public speaking, right? I have to do this presentation. Whereas if you're in a psychologically unsafe environment, you may totally shut down. You might not share that with anyone, or you may do the presentation and be shaking and feel like no one has your back. So it's really about how do you feel comfortable sharing things enough with your manager so that they can help you be successful in this as well too.
And so as we're talking about this, we're talking about the personal experience of psychological safety. There are real implications for companies and for teams that don't have the right environment for psychological safety. Can you talk a little bit about what companies are missing out on if this isn't in place?
There's so many things, especially right now, that are happening. So first, I want to use an example of a client that brought me in to do psychological safety. They had a people manager, team leader that was very much a micromanager. And what ended up happening was that management style then became the management style of her direct reports, and people started leaving. It was just too toxic. People did not have the opportunity to learn or grow. Everything that was taking place or happening was just in this very tense environment. And so the folks that left, that was part of that great resignation. That's some of the implications of this when there is no psychological safety in place. The other things that you'll start to see is, again, some of these phenomena that are coming out in the workplace, like quiet quitting. I was talking to a manager the other day about that. And he's just, if I actually take the time to find out what's happening with my team, they'll think that I'm invested in them. He's like, I really am. And so they'll actually be more invested in the work that's happening as well, too. And it's like, yeah, it's that simple, right? It's not like it's not rocket science. It's taking the time to truly be invested. When that doesn't happen, that's when you see folks resign. That's when you see folks only doing just enough of the job to get by, right? To get the paycheck. You don't want that. Particularly now in hybrid environments, it's very important that psychological safety is a part of the conversation, right? Inclusion is a part of the conversation because you want people to stay connected, stay valued. They want to feel valued, seen, and heard. And so it's an organization's responsibility to be intentional in how they create these environments.
The Antigen podcast returns with a 3-part miniseries spotlighting maternal immunization. When it comes to vaccine development, there's been a shifting paradigm. Help protect pregnant women and their infants through research, rather than from research. Join us this season to dive deeper into this topic, the history, challenges, innovations, and exciting developments to come. Subscribe and listen to The Antigen, powered by Pfizer, on your favorite podcast app.
And organizations are just collections of people.
Absolutely.
So when we say an organization needs to do this, we mean everybody in the organization needs to make this their job. It's not the CEO's job alone. It's not HR's job alone. It's not the diversity and inclusion office's job alone, right? It's every manager, every team member.
And that's why I truly focus on people managers, because what I find is these conversations happen at the executive level, or the complaints happen frontline, but people managers are the ones that are doing this work, and they have not been equipped with the tools and resources to be successful in this space. So when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, okay, yeah, we're talking about it, but what does that mean in the day-to-day? They don't know. No one's giving them a roadmap of how to do this. And so with the work that I do with psychological safety, not only do I come in and provide your team an assessment, but I work with you one-on-one to help you operationalize, right? Make it personal for you, the small things that you can do as a people manager to really make big change.
You and I are so aligned in this, because I always talk about, we don't want diversity and inclusion to be something that we bolt on to leadership. It needs to be a shift, just a slight shift in how we do the work of leadership.
Yeah.
So that it's inclusive for all of our team members and for diverse teams.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing exactly the same.
That's it, right? The model that the program that I use is, cut that out. The program that I offer, the offering that I provide is inclusive leadership management, or inclusive leadership development. And the foundation of that is psychological safety. So it's not abstract. I'm like, this is your score. This is what your team has said that their experience has been, right? And so you're seeing a graph of psychologically safe, neutral, or okay, wait a minute, there's problems over here. And how do we start to change this? So it gives them something very tangible to work with. But me as a coach, it allows me to say, okay, what do you want to focus on today? What are the challenges? And so we really start to work on, how can you become a more inclusive leader? How can I provide you with different options or opportunities to look at things from different perspectives, so that you're not just saying, okay, this is how I've done it and this is what worked for me. You're the only you. That's not going to always work for your team. And so how do we get leaders, people leaders, out of that mindset into truly being more inclusive and understanding of their entire team?
I absolutely love this. And we have so much more to discuss offline about, about how we're going to marry coaching and training together to make this happen in places. But real quick, just the companies that you're working with, what kinds of results are they seeing after you've done these interventions, after you've coached these leaders? What are you seeing that's different?
You know what? I had a call, actually a couple of calls this week with some leaders just to follow up. Hey, you know, what's going on? This is our monthly call. And one person said, Sacha, you didn't tell me a lot to do. I was like, no, because that's not my job, is to tell you what to do. He's like, but I made one small tweak and it has changed everything. He's like, rather than me coming in and saying, hey team, this is what we're going to do. He's like, I actually asked them what they need. And I'm like, what about that? Okay, so tell me more. And so he said he's not only doing it with his team, he's doing it with his clients, he's doing it with artists. Like, he has just, that one shift in asking people what they need has totally changed how he interacts with them, how they started opening up to him, changed the conversations that they're having. So that's how this works. Right? It's not massive changes that we're making. It's small tweaks of ways to think about how to increase psychological safety for your team so that they open up, so that there's trust, right? You're trying to increase trust. I have another client that we're now on our third round of psychological safety assessments with them. And for them, it's, we want to get a perfect score. And I'm like, okay, things change, dynamics change. But their mindset is, we want to continue to be one of the best employers in our region. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that this score stays high. And so they have invested company-wide in doing the psychological safety assessment. Like I said, this is their third round of doing this. And so for them, it's how do we stay attuned to what's happening with our employees? How do we partner this with our other culture work that we're doing? How do we see some gaps? So for example, with that particular client, they did some culture work with another consultant, but between the work that I was doing and they were doing, they saw, okay, there's a challenge around generational diversity here. It's like some of these other aspects of diversity are a challenge, but generation is the big one. So it allowed them to be able to be very specific and fine-tune what education they needed for their company, right? So that's the change. That's the work. It's been amazing. I've absolutely loved doing this because it's truly changing people, how they show up as managers in this space, which is truly impacting their employees and how they show up at work.
So if somebody is listening and they work for a company where they feel like this is needed, let's say they're a frontline manager, they're an executive, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you to learn more about the tools and the services that you offer?
Yeah, so you can actually go to tinyurl.com/EEPSY safety, right? Or you can go to the equityequationllc.com, my website, or just follow me on LinkedIn, Sacha Thompson, SachaThompson. And any of those places will get you to me and I can get you more information.
That sounds great. We will put all of those links in the show notes. So you don't have to stop driving to write it all down. Just go to the show notes later and we'll have it all there for you. Sacha Thompson, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for your expertise, and for your friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. It's been such a pleasure. Looking forward to having more of these conversations with you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Lead at Any Level on LinkedIn and YouTube. Then join us for Including You video simulcast every Thursday at noon Eastern. Including You can also be enjoyed each week as part of the Living Corporate audio podcast series, available on all major podcast platforms. Learn more at living-corporate.com. Including You is brought to you in part by Lead at Any Level, a boutique training and consulting firm improving employee engagement and retention for companies that promote from within. Lead at Any Level. Leaders can be anywhere and should be everywhere. Learn more at leadatanylevel.com. Lead at Any Level and its logo are registered trademarks of Lead at Any Level LLC. The views and opinions of guests on our show do not necessarily reflect the positions of Lead at Any Level, Living Corporate, or the sponsors of Including You.
That's it for this week's episode of Including You. Join me next week when my guest will be Teresa Belthrop Hairston from Delta Dental of California.